You're going to have to look at Poppy's house too. That's another investment that is sitting there. I know they're talking about maybe an Airbnb, but we're not really utilizing it. It's in the middle of nowhere. And we have pretty much cut ties with Living Water, so we're not working with.
Why are we not utilizing Poppy's house?
Well, because there's just not enough ministers that are gathering there for every weekend, and so
Denise was keeping it preoccupied.
No, she really wasn't. I mean, she was maybe once a month, had some stuff in there, but we're not working with Denise any longer. We've cut ties with Living Waters. We won't be working with them any longer.
Why is that?
I just want the truth to come out.
I'm not hiding any part of this.
Yes, you are. Why have you tried to shut up Denise? Why have you threatened her with lawsuits?
Jonathan,
Why? I want to know. What does she know that you're so scared of?
Denise doesn't know anything, but she's broke confidentiality with.
So why have you threatened her with lawsuits then?
I have not threatened her with a lawsuit. I said if she continues.
That's not true. Darius Johnston threatened her with a lawsuit.
What happens when a widow, once hailed as a beacon of Christian faith and perseverance, makes a decision so controversial, so bewildering, that it threatens to undo the very legacy her husband spent a lifetime building? This isn't just a story about grief. It's not just about moving on after loss. It's about betrayal, power, and the slow surgical dismantling of a legacy once dedicated to redemption and healing. Today, we dive deep into the unraveling of Poppy's house, Marcus Lamb's final act of repentance and restoration, a place that once held promise for broken ministers, now reduced to a silent memory, stripped away for reasons that go far beyond dollars. And at the center of it all, Joni Lamb, her controversial marriage to Dr. Doug Weiss, and a circle of silence, influence, and retaliation that leaves more questions than answers. When Marcus Lamb passed away, the Christian world mourned. Some grieved a televangelist, others grieved a mentor, but Joni Lamb lost a husband, and with that grief came responsibility, the stewardship of a sprawling Christian media empire and the spiritual legacies tied to it. One of those legacies was Poppy's house. Not just a structure, not just land. Poppy's house was Marcus Lamb's redemption, a heartfelt vision born out of his own failure, created to give fallen pastors a chance at healing, at wholeness, at second chances. But just months after his death, Poppy's house was sold quietly and for hundreds of thousands below its true value. Why? According to multiple sources close to the ministry, the answer was chilling. Doug Weiss hated it, and Joni Lamb, under his growing influence, complied. The problem: Poppy's house wasn't just real estate, it was spiritually symbolic. Tied to Denise Boggs, a trusted counselor and friend of the Lamb family, the property represented everything Marcus had come to believe in: accountability, healing, transparency. And Denise, she became the first voice to openly warn Joni about Doug Weiss. She had counseled him, spent hours with Lisa Weiss, Doug's former wife. She knew the patterns, the trauma, the spiritual dysfunction, and she urged Joni gently but firmly, don't marry him. Not yet, not like this, but love or something more manipulative had already taken root. Joni ignored the warnings, narrator, and Denise paid the price. She wasn't just sidelined, she was slandered. The woman once embraced by Daystar was branded a divisive spirit, a traitor. Her reputation dismantled with surgical precision. Programs linked to her were canceled. Counseling ministries shut down. Staff members quietly let go. Poppy's house sold, not just erased from the books, but sold for less than it was worth without proper disclosure to donors, an act Jonathan Lamb later described as fraudulent. These weren't isolated missteps. This was a pattern. When Denise Boggs sounded the alarm, it wasn't just for Johnny's sake, it was for Daystar, for the flock. But instead of transparency, the ministry turned inward, and Doug, he turned hostile. Legal threats followed, cease and desist letters, phone calls to silence whistleblowers. Joni Lamb, once a face of compassion and grace, had allegedly morphed into a gatekeeper for Doug's new empire. With Marcus gone, Doug stepped into power, but not as a servant leader, as a rebrander, a disruptor, Programs that emphasized humility and healing disappeared. In their place, a bolder, brasher narrative. Daystar wasn't just shifting, it was being rewritten. And then came the financial shock. While donors were told their gifts were funding ministry expansion, reports emerged of a $2 million beach house allegedly purchased by Joni herself. At a time when counseling programs were being defunded. At a time when Poppy's house was sold. At a time when broken pastors were looking for hope. This isn't just about one marriage. It's about a cultural crisis inside Christian leadership, where spiritual accountability is treated as optional, where whistleblowers are branded as enemies, and where power, once touched, becomes nearly impossible to surrender. Doug Weiss didn't just step into Marcus Lamb's shadow, he tried to erase it. And Joni, she let him. The legacy of Marcus Lamb was never perfect, but it was sincere. The story of Poppy's house deserved better, and the truth deserves light. This isn't just a scandal, it's a blueprint, a spiritual scheme that's played out far too many times in the shadows of Christian television, behind the stages of megachurches, and beneath the bright lights of so-called prophetic platforms. It always starts the same way: urgency. An artificial sense of divine pressure is created. Viewers are told, sow your best seed now or risk missing the blessing God has for you. And with those words, manipulation begins. A sacred act, giving, is turned into a high-pressure transaction wrapped in emotional hype and spiritual guilt. This toxic cycle doesn't just harm reputations, it wounds hearts, it scars faith, it drives believers, many of them new in their walk with Christ, away from the church altogether. Why? Because they believed and they were betrayed. This is not just about bad leadership, it's about spiritual abuse, manipulation wrapped in religious language. And if the church doesn't call it out, if we continue turning a blind eye, then we are complicit. Real ministry, genuine Christ-centered ministry, requires truth. It demands humility. It demands financial transparency and pastoral accountability. And right now, we're seeing what happens when those things are absent. Because behind the scenes at Daystar, a different story was unfolding, one that few viewers knew about until now. Former employees are coming forward, and what they're describing is chilling. Daystar was not just a network. It operated, many now say, more like a spiritual cult. Staff members were required to sign strict NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, not to protect sensitive data, but to muzzle conscience. These documents ensured that anyone who witnessed abuse, deception, or misconduct could not legally speak out. Employees were not just discouraged from asking questions, they were forbidden from doing so. Those who dared to raise concerns were met with swift and severe consequences, reassigned, demoted, isolated, or quietly removed. Publicly, the image was pristine. Weekly praise reports were scripted. Staff were instructed on what to say and how to say it. Every testimony, every update, every behind-the-scenes story was curated to reinforce one narrative. This is a holy place, a blessed place, a perfect place. But perfection was a lie, and the cost of maintaining that illusion was high. Employees report a culture of social shunning. Those who fell out of favor with leadership were ghosted, left out of meetings, ignored at prayer circles, and cut off from the community they had once poured their hearts into. And this wasn't just professional fallout, it was spiritual. Staff were made to feel that questioning leadership was questioning God himself. That speaking up was rebellion, that leaving was disobedience. For years, that system worked. It kept the truth buried. It kept the money flowing. It kept the image polished until now. Today, that silence is breaking. Former staff members are finding their voices, and they are done being afraid, done pretending, done protecting a system that prioritized power over people, image over integrity, and influence over obedience to Christ. So we leave you with this final reminder. The church doesn't need bigger stages. It needs bolder truth. It doesn't need more platforms. It needs more repentance. And if you've ever felt betrayed by a ministry that used God's name to exploit your trust, hear this. God sees, God cares, and God will not be mocked. Truth is rising. Justice is coming.